The rain in Sector 4 did not wash things clean. It merely slicked the grime of the city into a glossy, reflective veneer, turning the streets into mirrors that distorted the neon advertisements towering above. Ethan watched the water streak down the window of the 42nd floor, his forehead resting against the cold glass. Below him, the city sprawled like a circuit board of amber and electric blue, humming with a life he felt entirely disconnected from. It was 8 in the evening on a Tuesday, and he was the last one in the open-plan office of Helios Systems. The silence of the room was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the air recyclers and the occasional ping of a server rack cooling down. Ethan stared at his reflection in the dark window. He looked older than 32. The dark circles under his eyes seemed permanent now, etched into skin that had seen too much artificial light and not enough sun. He looked down at the tablet in his hand. It displayed the final draft of the corporate sustainability initiative he had spent the last 3 weeks refining. It was a masterpiece of empty rhetoric. The text promised a 40% reduction in carbon emissions and a commitment to green urban renewal. But Ethan knew the reality. It was a shell game. Helios Systems was simply moving their waste processing to orbital platforms, dumping the slag into the gravity wells of uninhabited moons, and calling it clean energy. He felt a familiar hollow ache in his chest. It was the sensation of being a very small, very replaceable cog in a machine so vast it could not even perceive him. You are too afraid to want anything. Ethan. The voice was a memory, sharp and clear. Maya. She had said it 2 years ago, standing in the doorway of his apartment with her bags packed, waiting for him to ask her to stay. He had said nothing. He had let her go because it was safer to be alone than to fail at being together. That moment had become a ghost that lived in his hallway, haunting him every time he walked through the front door. Ethan powered down the tablet and tossed it onto his desk. He grabbed his coat. He was done. The drive home was a blur of wiper blades and brake lights. His apartment complex was a monolith of gray concrete on the edge of the residential district, a place where people lived because it was efficient, not because it was home. When he unlocked his door, the air inside was stale. Piles of mail he had not opened sat on the counter. His laundry hamper was overflowing. Books he meant to read but never did were stacked like leaning towers against the wall. He stood in the center of the living room, water dripping from his coat onto the laminate floor, and felt a sudden, violent surge of claustrophobia. It was the clutter. It was the physical manifestation of his stagnation. He was drowning in things he did not need and memories he did not want. Ethan moved before he could talk himself out of it. He grabbed a box of heavy-duty black garbage bags from under the sink and marched into his bedroom. He started with the closet. He pulled down shirts he had not worn in 5 years, trousers that were out of style, and jackets that smelled like old dust. He worked with a frantic energy, tearing hangers from the rail, stuffing fabric into the plastic maw of the bag. He reached for his favorite hoodie. It was a faded charcoal gray, oversized and soft, with frayed cuffs and a zipper that stuck halfway up. He had lived in that hoodie through college and his first terrible breakup. He held it for a second, feeling the weight of the cotton. No, he thought. If I am going to change, I have to clear it all out. He shoved the hoodie into the bag. He grabbed a pair of worn denim jeans from the chair, the ones with the hole in the left knee, and stuffed them in as well. He did not stop until the closet looked barren and the room felt twice as large. He tied the neck of the bag into a tight knot, the plastic stretching white at the stress points. He checked the time. It was nearly 11 at night. The donation center near the mall would be closed. But he knew of a drop-off point in the older part of the city, near the defunct textile district. It was a solitary metal bin sitting in the shadow of a boarded-up community center. He hauled the bag over his shoulder. He felt lighter already. The drive to the textile district took 20 minutes. The infrastructure here was failing. The streetlights flickered in an erratic staccato rhythm, buzzing like angry insects. Potholes filled with rainwater reflected the fractured moonlight. There were no other cars on the road. The towering glass spires of the city center felt a world away, replaced by brick warehouses and chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Ethan pulled his sedan up to the curb. The donation bin was a hulking metal box painted a cheerful, peeling yellow that looked gruesome under the sodium street lamps. It had a pull-down chute designed to prevent people from reaching inside. He killed the engine. The rain had softened to a drizzle, misting the windshield. Ethan grabbed the heavy black bag from the passenger seat. He stepped out of the car, the wet pavement crunching under his boots. The air smelled of wet concrete and ozone. He walked to the bin, the bag bumping against his leg. He wrestled the metal chute open. It groaned on rusted hinges, a harsh, scraping sound that echoed in the empty street. He heaved the bag into the metal maw and pushed the chute closed. The mechanism clanked, swallowing his past, dusting his hands off on his trousers. Ethan exhaled a long breath of white mist. It was done. A small act, perhaps, but it felt like a beginning. He got back into the car and turned the key. The dashboard lit up, casting a soft blue glow over his hands. He reached for his back pocket to check for his wallet, a habit he checked every time he started the car. His pocket was empty. Ethan frowned. He patted his jacket pockets. Nothing. He checked the passenger seat, the floor mats, the center console. Panic began to prickle at the back of his neck. He remembered carrying the laundry bag out of the apartment. He had been wearing his sweatpants, which had shallow pockets. So he had slipped his wallet into the front pocket of the hoodie to keep it safe while he carried the bags. The hoodie that was currently sitting inside the metal box 5 yards away. Ethan slammed his hands against the steering wheel. "Unbelievable," he said to the empty car. "You are an absolute idiot." Ethan. He stared at the yellow bin through the rain-streaked windshield. His ID, his credit cards, his access key to the Helios Systems building, everything was in that wallet. He could not leave it. Cursing softly, he killed the engine again and stepped back out into the cold. The wind had picked up, biting through his thin shirt. He marched up to the bin. He grabbed the handle of the chute and pulled. It opened about 6 inches and then jammed. He tugged harder. Metal shrieked against metal, but the door refused to budge. It felt like something was wedged in the mechanism. "Come on," he muttered, gripping the handle with both hands. He planted his feet and yanked with all his strength. The door flew open with a deafening screech. Ethan peered into the dark maw of the chute, ready to reach in and fish around for the plastic bag. But he froze. There was a sound coming from the other side of the bin, not from inside the box, but from the shadows wedged between the bin and the brick wall of the community center. It was a soft, wet sound, like a choke or a gasp for air. Ethan took a step back, his heart skipping a beat. "Hello?" he called out. "Is someone there?" The only answer was the scraping of metal, as if something was dragging itself against the side of the bin. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, activating the flashlight. The beam cut through the drizzle, illuminating the peeling paint of the yellow metal. He moved around the side of the bin, stepping carefully over trash and wet leaves. The light swept across the wet pavement and landed on a figure crouched in the dirt. Ethan stopped dead. It was a young woman. She was curled into a tight ball, her knees pulled up to her chest, her head bowed. She was shaking violently, her breath coming in ragged white puffs in the cold air. But it was not her presence that made Ethan's breath catch in his throat. It was what she was wearing. She was draped in a charcoal gray hoodie, his hoodie, the one he had tossed into the bin less than 5 minutes ago. It was zipped up to her chin, swallowing her slender frame, the sleeves bunching around her wrists. Below it, she wore his old denim jeans, rolled up clumsily at the ankles to keep them from dragging on the ground. Her feet were bare. They were pale, covered in mud and scratches, the skin raw from the cold. Ethan stared, his mind struggling to process the sequence of events. He had tossed old clothes into a donation bin. He had returned to get his wallet, and now he was looking at a shivering woman wearing them. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice gentle but trembling. "Are you okay?" The woman's head snapped up. Ethan flinched, the flashlight beam wavering in his hand. Her face was striking, angular and pale, framed by wet, dark hair that clung to her cheeks. But her eyes stopped him cold. They were not human eyes. The irises were enormous, consuming nearly the entire visible surface, and they were the color of deep space, a swirling abyssal violet speckled with flecks of gold that seemed to drift and orbit like actual stars. There was a depth to them that made Ethan dizzy, as if he were looking into a telescope rather than a face. And she was glowing, faint. Bioluminescent lines pulsed beneath the skin of her neck and jaw, a soft, rhythmic blue light that faded and surged with her heartbeat. She scrambled backward, pressing her spine against the cold metal of the donation bin. She held up a hand to shield her eyes from his flashlight, her fingers long and delicate. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was melodic but strained, the vowels elongated in a way that sounded unnatural. "Do not summon the lights." Ethan lowered the phone instantly, pointing the beam at the ground so the ambient glow remained but did not blind her. He took a slow step forward, hands raised to show he was empty-handed. "I'm not summoning anything," he said. I left something in the bin." "My wallet." She stared at him, her chest heaving beneath the oversized gray fabric. She looked terrified, like a trapped animal waiting for a strike. She glanced at the hoodie she was wearing, clutching the fabric with desperation. "This covering," she said, the words coming out slow and formal. "It was discarded. It was offered. I required warmth. It's yours," Ethan said quickly. "Keep it. It's fine." He looked at her bare feet again. The mud was mixed with blood. She was hurt. The rational part of his brain, the part that wrote risk assessment reports for Helios systems, was screaming at him to run. This was impossible. The glowing skin, the eyes. This was not a costume. This was something that did not belong in a textile district alleyway. But then she looked at him again, and he saw a fear so profound it cut through his hesitation. He recognized that look. It was the look of someone who had absolutely nowhere left to go. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. She opened her mouth to speak, but suddenly her head snapped to the left. A siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. A police cruiser turned the corner 3 blocks away, its red and blue lights flashing against the wet brick buildings. The woman gasped, a sharp, sucking sound. She threw herself flat against the ground, trying to crawl behind the bulk of the bin, making herself as small as possible. "The uniformed men," she hissed. "They hunt the skyfall." Ethan looked at the cruiser. It was moving slowly, prowling. If they saw his car parked there, they might stop. If they found her. He looked back at the woman. She was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. Under the loose collar of the hoodie, he saw the silver tattoos on her neck shift. They did not just sit on the skin, they moved, rearranging themselves into new geometric patterns like liquid mercury. Ethan felt a sudden, sharp clarity. If he walked away, she would be found. And whatever she was running from, the way she said uniformed men told him she would not survive the encounter. He thought of Maya, too afraid to want anything, too afraid to act. Ethan crouched down. "Listen to me," he said, keeping his voice low and urgent. "My car is right there, the gray one. I can get you out of here." She looked at the car, then back at him. Her star-filled eyes searched his face, looking for deception. "Why?" she asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But you're shivering, and you're bleeding." The police cruiser was 2 blocks away now. The lights swept over the pavement, inching closer to the alley entrance. The woman hesitated for a fraction of a second longer, then nodded. She scrambled to her feet, stumbling slightly. Ethan reached out to steady her, his hand gripping the sleeve of the hoodie, his hoodie. Her arm underneath felt impossibly cold, solid but vibrating with a low-frequency hum. "Quickly," he said. He guided her to the passenger side, opened the door, and practically shoved her in. He ran to the driver's side, jumped in, and started the engine just as the cruiser rolled past the mouth of the alley. Ethan held his breath, keeping the headlights off. The police car paused, its spotlight sweeping the brick wall above them, missing them by feet, before continuing down the street. Ethan exhaled, his grip on the steering wheel white-knuckled. He put the car in gear and pulled out slowly, turning in the opposite direction. The woman in the passenger seat was pressed as far against the door as she could go. She was staring at the dashboard lights with wide, terrified eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan turned on the heater, blasting warm air into the cabin. "Where do you want to go? Do you have people? A place?" She shook her head slowly. "I possess no coordinates in this sector. I have no designation that your tongue could shape without injury." Ethan glanced at her. The streetlights strobed over her face. Now that he was closer, he saw the lines on her face were not just tattoos, they were embedded in the dermis, shimmering with that faint bioluminescence. "Okay," he said. "No name I can say. Can I call you something else just for now?" She looked at the dashboard again, where the digital clock glowed. Then she looked out the window at the sky, which was thick with clouds, hiding the stars. She traced a shape on the cold glass with her finger. "Lyra," she said. "It is a constellation. In your charts." "Lyra," Ethan repeated. It sounded nice. "Okay, Lyra, I'm Ethan. Ethan." She tasted the word, testing its weight. It is a soft sound. Ethan navigated the car onto the main arterial highway, heading back toward the residential district. His mind was racing. He had an alien in his car, a fugitive alien. He should drive to the hospital. He should drive to the police station, but he kept driving home. He reached for the radio, needing something to fill the heavy silence. He pressed the power button. "Repeat. A code black security breach has been reported at the Helios Systems Research Facility in Sector 9. Witnesses report an explosion in the containment wing followed by a complete lockdown. Corporate security forces are advising all residents to report any suspicious activity or unidentified individuals immediately. This is a developing story." Lyra stiffened. Her bioluminescence flared bright blue for a second, illuminating the cab of the car before dimming rapidly. She grabbed the edge of the hoodie's hood and pulled it down low over her face. Ethan's stomach dropped. Sector 9. That was the classified division. The rumors around the office said they worked on next-generation propulsion, but no one from his department was allowed near it. "That's you, isn't it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The breach." Lyra did not look at him. She stared at her hands, hands that were currently tucked into the sleeves of his old college sweatshirt. "I did not cause the explosion," she said, her voice trembling. "I only used the chaos to depart. They intended to disassemble me, Ethan, to see how the starlight is bound to the carbon." Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp clothes. Disassemble. He looked at her, small, huddled, wearing his cast-offs. She wasn't a monster. She was a refugee. And the company he had spent the last 5 years writing sustainability reports for had been trying to take her apart. He reached out and turned the radio off. The silence rushed back in, but it felt different now. It was a conspiratorial silence. "We're almost there," he said. "My place is quiet. No one looks for anyone there." Getting her into the apartment was a nerve-wracking exercise in stealth. Ethan parked in the underground garage, checking the corners for cameras he knew were dummy units that hadn't worked in years. He draped his own coat over her head to hide her face and hurried her into the elevator. When the door to his apartment clicked shut and the deadbolt slid home, Ethan finally breathed. Lyra stood in the center of his living room. The space was cleaner than it had been in years, thanks to his earlier purge. But it still felt small and cluttered compared to the vastness of the space she seemed to carry in her eyes. She looked around, bewildered. She touched the back of his sofa, the stack of unread books, the lamp. She moved with a strange grace, fluid and silent, despite the limp from her injured feet. "You need to get cleaned up," Ethan said, locking the chain on the door. "And those cuts on your feet need antiseptic." "I do not understand the function of this room," she said, gesturing to the television. "It's for entertainment. Stories. We watch them." She tilted her head. "You watch stories. You do not live them." "Sometimes I think that's all we do," Ethan muttered. He showed her the bathroom. He had to explain the shower controls, how to turn the knob for hot water, what the soap was for. She listened with an intensity that made him flush. She was an advanced life form capable of interstellar travel, yet she looked at a bottle of shampoo like it was a holy artifact. "I will leave these here," Ethan said, placing a clean towel and a fresh t-shirt on the vanity. I'll be right outside." He closed the door and retreated to the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, his hands shaking. He filled the kettle and set it to boil. He needed to do something normal. Tea. Tea was normal. He heard the water running in the shower. The sound was intimate, domestic. It made his apartment feel completely different, charged with a strange electricity. 20 minutes later, the bathroom door opened. Lyra stepped out. Steam billowed around her. She had showered, but she had put the gray hoodie and jeans back on. The hoodie was damp in patches where her wet hair touched it. She was rubbing her hair with the towel he had given her. The grime was gone. Her skin was the color of moonlight, pale and luminous. Without the mud, the silver tattoos were more visible, running in intricate geometric currents down her neck and vanishing beneath the collar of the sweatshirt. She looked at him, clutching the towel. The fear was still there, but it was softer now. I utilized the water," she said. "It was excessive, but pleasing." Ethan stared at her. He felt a sudden fierce pull in his chest. It was a protective instinct so strong it startled him. He wanted to stand between her and the door. He wanted to make sure no one from Helios Systems ever touched her again. But beneath that, there was something else, a flicker of attraction. She was beautiful in a way that was terrifying. The contrast of her alien features with the mundane, familiar baggy hoodie he had worn 1,000 times created a dissonance in his brain that was strangely alluring. He looked away, ashamed. She was a fugitive. She was frightened. She was dependent on him entirely, and he could not think like that. "I made tea," he said, his voice sounding rough. "It's hot. It helps with shivering." He held out a mug. Lyra stepped forward and took it. Her fingers brushed his. Her skin was cool, but a static charge jumped between them, making the hair on Ethan's arms stand up. She brought the mug to her face and inhaled the steam. "Chamomile," Ethan said. "It's supposed to be calming." "Calming," she repeated. She looked up at him over the rim of the mug, her star-filled eyes locked onto his. "You returned." "Ethan, what?" "At the metal box. You returned. You came back?" "Yeah," Ethan said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I forgot my wallet." Lyra lowered the mug. A faint smile touched her lips, foreign and hesitant. "I do not think it was the wallet," she said softly. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, to explain about the ID and the credit cards, but the words died in his throat. He looked at her, standing there in his clothes, safe in his living room while the rain battered the window pane. "Maybe not," he said. He gestured to the couch. "You can sleep there. It pulls out. It's not great, but it's better than the floor." "Thank you," she said. Ethan grabbed a blanket from the closet and set it down next to her. He kept a respectful distance, backing away toward his bedroom door. "Good night, Lyra." "Good night, Ethan." He went into his room and closed the door. He did not turn on the light. He sat on the edge of his bed, listening to the rain and the soft sounds of an alien woman settling onto his couch. He looked at his hands. They were steady now. For the first time in 2 years, the apartment did not feel empty. And for the first time in his life, Ethan was absolutely terrified of what the morning would bring. The digital clock on Ethan's bedside table read 3 in the morning. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt heavy, pressing against his eardrums. He woke not from a nightmare, but from a sudden sharp shift in the air pressure of the room, as if the apartment had suddenly been transported to a higher altitude. He sat up, rubbing the grit of exhaustion from his eyes. The door to the living room was slightly ajar, and a strange rhythmic blue light pulsed through the gap, casting long, stretching shadows against the hallway wall. Ethan swung his legs out of bed. The floor was cold. He moved silently, drawn by the light, his heart hammering a slow, heavy beat against his ribs. He pushed the door open. Lyra was standing by the large window that overlooked the sleeping city. She was still wearing his gray hoodie, the fabric swallowing her small frame, but the sleeves were pushed up to her elbows. Her hands were raised in the air, moving in complex, sweeping arcs. She was not just waving her hands. She was drawing. Trails of luminescence hung in the air where her fingers passed, burning with a soft indigo fire. They were geometric shapes, intricate and shifting, circles that intersected with triangles, lines that spiraled into fractals. They hovered in the stagnant air of his living room, a glowing map that seemed to breathe. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway. He had spent 10 years working in tech, looking at screens, analyzing data streams. He knew what a hologram was. This was not a hologram. This was light being manipulated by biology. "Lyra," he whispered. She did not startle this time. She turned her head slowly, her hands still suspended in the glowing web she had created. Her eyes were fully dilated, 2 voids of starry violet. "I am calibrating," she said. Her voice sounded different, deeper, resonant, as if it were vibrating through the floorboards. "Calibrating what?" Ethan asked, stepping into the room. "My position," she replied. "The concrete. It interferes with the magnetic sense." I need to see the stars to know where I am relative to the gateway. She turned back to the window. The glass was dark, backed by the night, acting as a perfect mirror. Ethan looked at her reflection. For a second, the image in the glass was not the young woman in the gray hoodie. It was something tall, elongated, and terrifyingly elegant. The skin of the reflection was not pale flesh, but a shifting surface of obsidian and starlight, and the eyes were burning white novas. It lasted for a heartbeat, a glitch in reality, and then the image settled back into the form of the girl he had rescued. Ethan gripped the back of his armchair to steady himself. The reality of it hit him harder than it had in the alley. The girl in the alley was a victim. This was a being capable of things his physics textbooks said were impossible. "You're really not from here," Ethan said, the obviousness of the statement hanging in the air like smoke. The glowing symbols in the air faded, dissolving into motes of light that drifted to the floor and vanished. Lyra lowered her arms. She looked exhausted, her shoulders slumping. "No," she said softly. "I am not. My body is attuned to stellar fields. It is how my people navigate the void between systems. But here, beneath the iron and the electricity, I am blind." She turned to face him, the bioluminescent lines on her neck dimmed to a faint pulse. "Does it frighten you?" she asked. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the fear behind the power. He saw a navigator who had lost her stars. "Yeah," he admitted, walking to the kitchenette to pour a glass of water. "It terrifies me, but not in the way you think." He handed her the glass. She took it with both hands, her fingers brushing his. "I'm terrified because if you can do that," he said, gesturing to the space where the lights had been, "then the people chasing you must be strong enough to contain it. And all I have is a Honda Civic and a maxed-out credit card." Lyra took a sip of water. A faint smile touched her lips. "Your vehicle was sufficient," she said. Morning brought a gray, washed-out light to the city and the smell of coffee to the apartment. Ethan sat at his small kitchen island, watching Lyra examine a toaster as if it were a bomb diffusal mechanism. "So, let me get this straight," Ethan said, blowing on his mug. "You were in a prison. But it wasn't a government black site. It was a joint venture?" Lyra nodded. She had rolled the sleeves of the hoodie down, hiding her markings. She looked almost normal, like a college student crashing on a friend's couch, except for the intensity of her gaze. "The Interstellar Council has laws against direct intervention," she explained, her English smoother than the night before, though still formal. "They cannot invade an inhabited world, but they can trade." "Trade?" Ethan asked. "Technology for biology," Lyra said grimly. "Your leaders, a select few, are given access to life extension therapies and energy manipulation systems. In exchange, they allow the Council to use Earth as a resource node, a laboratory." Ethan felt a bitter laugh bubble up in his throat. It was so perfectly, cynically corporate. "Of course," he muttered. "We sold out the planet for better batteries and Botox." Lyra frowned, tilting her head. "I do not know this Botox. Is it a weapon?" "No," Ethan said, rubbing his temples. "It's a poison people inject into their faces to look younger. So, yes, actually, it is a weapon against time." He took a long drink of coffee. It tasted like ash today. "And the facility?" he asked. "The one you broke out of?" "It is where they keep the dissidents," Lyra said. "Refugees from worlds the Council has already strip-mined. They bring us here because Earth is off the main galactic charts. It is a shadow world. No one looks for lost things here." Ethan looked down at his own clothes, a wrinkled button-down shirt he had pulled from the laundry pile. Great, he said. So Earth is the galactic equivalent of that donation bin I found you in. Just a place to dump things no one wants. Lyra looked at him sharply. That is not true, she said. Ethan waved a hand. I'm being sarcastic. Lyra, it's a defense mechanism. We use it when reality is too stupid to deal with directly. She stared at him, blinking slowly. You say things you do not mean to protect yourself from the truth? Yes. That seems inefficient. Ethan laughed, a dry, cracking sound. Welcome to humanity. We are incredibly inefficient. We spend 40 hours a week sitting in boxes typing numbers so we can afford to live in slightly larger boxes. He stood up and poured her a mug of coffee. She sniffed it suspiciously. Try it, he said. It's essential fuel. Without it, the economy collapses by noon. Lyra took a tentative sip. Her eyes widened. She shuddered, a ripple of movement that went from her shoulders to her bare feet. It is bitter, she said, and it vibrates. Yeah, that's the caffeine, Ethan said. You get used to it. He leaned against the counter, watching her hold the mug with both hands. So, he said, we're roommates now. Roommates. She tested the word, mates of the room. This implies a reproductive bond within a confined space. Ethan choked on his coffee. No, definitely not. It means cohabitants. We share the space. We split the rent. Well, I pay the rent. You are a fugitive from space justice, so you get a free pass. Lyra looked around the cluttered apartment. And this, Netflix, you mentioned it last night. Ethan sighed. It is a library of hallucinations we stare at to forget we are tired. Look, Lyra, the point is, you're safe here for now, but we need to figure out what to do. You can't just stay in my apartment forever. I do not intend to, she said, her voice dropping. If they find me, they will find you, and you are fragile. Ethan looked at his hands. He felt fragile. He felt like a porcelain cup sitting on the edge of a table during an earthquake. I'm tougher than I look, he lied. Lyra looked at him, her violet eyes piercing. That was sarcasm again, wasn't it? Ethan smiled wanly. You're learning fast. Over the next 2 days, the apartment became a strange microcosm of two worlds colliding. Ethan called in sick to work, citing a severe viral localized event, which was technically true if you considered Lyra the event. They fell into a bizarre domestic rhythm. Ethan spent hours scouring the dark web on his laptop, looking for chatter about the facility breach, while Lyra explored the concept of being human. He watched her try to mimic his morning stretches. He stood in the living room, touching his toes, and she stood beside him, bending her body in ways that should have snapped a human spine, her face a mask of serious concentration. It is important to lengthen the fibers? She asked, her head between her knees, looking at him upside down. Yes, Ethan said, wincing as his hamstrings protested. It keeps us from getting stiff. My fibers do not stiffen, she noted. But I enjoy the ritual. It feels purposeful. For lunch, he ordered takeout. He decided on Thai food, thinking the complexity of flavors might be interesting to her. He set the cartons on the coffee table. This is pad Thai, he explained. It's noodles. And this is green curry. Be careful with that one. Lyra picked up a fork, gripping it like a dagger. She watched him eat first, then cautiously took a bite of the curry. She chewed, she swallowed. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, her eyes went wide. The bioluminescent markings on her neck flared a brilliant, blinding white. She gasped, dropping the fork. It burns, she wheezed, grabbing her throat. It is a chemical attack. No, no, Ethan cried, scrambling to grab her glass of water. It's spice. It's chili. Drink this. She downed the water in one gulp, tears streaming from her star-filled eyes. She panted, her chest heaving, the glow on her skin pulsing rapidly like an alarm light. Why? She demanded, her voice hoarse. Why would you consume pain for sustenance? It's not pain, it's flavor, Ethan said, trying not to laugh. It releases endorphins, it makes you feel good. Eventually. Lyra glared at the curry carton. Humans are masochists, she declared, but she took another bite 5 minutes later. That evening, the mood shifted. The sun went down, and the city lights came on, painting the walls in stripes of orange and teal. They sat on the floor, the TV off. Ethan looked at Lyra. She was wearing his spare sweatpants now, pulled up high, and a t-shirt that said Helios Systems Corporate Retreat 2024. The irony was biting. You said you were a refugee, Ethan said quietly. What happened to your home? Lyra traced the pattern of the rug with her finger. It was designated as a high-value mineral zone, she said. The council arrived with ships that blocked out our sun. They said it was for our benefit. Integration, they called it. She looked up. We were not allowed to speak our own languages. We were not allowed to look at the sky. To look up was considered an act of defiance. They wanted us to look down, at the mines, at the work. She hugged her knees. I have never just existed. Ethan, I was a unit of labor. Then I was a unit of data in the prison. Ethan felt a heavy stone settle in his stomach. He thought of his cubicle. He thought of the endless reports he wrote that no one read. He thought of the way his boss looked through him. Not at him. I know it's not the same, he said softly. But I know what it feels like to be a cog. To feel like the system is so big that you don't matter. Like if you disappeared, the machine wouldn't even hiccup. It would just replace you. Lyra looked at him. You matter. Ethan, she said. You saw me. When I was nothing but a shape in the dark, you saw me. The system does not do that. Only a soul does that. Ethan swallowed hard. The air in the room felt suddenly very thin. The blackout happened on the third night. It wasn't a citywide outage. It was localized to their block. The lights flickered and died with an audible pop, plunging the apartment into absolute darkness. Ethan froze. Don't panic, he told himself. It's just the grid. The infrastructure in this sector is garbage. Stay put, he said into the dark. I have candles. He fumbled his way to the kitchen drawer, finding the emergency candles in a lighter. He struck a flame. The small yellow light flared, pushing back the shadows. He turned around. Lyra was standing right behind him. He gasped, nearly dropping the candle. The flame danced wildly. In the dark, she was a constellation. Her markings were glowing with a steady, soft azure light, mapping the curves of her face, her neck, her hands. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. The darkness is heavy here, she whispered. She stepped closer to him. The heating had gone off with the power, and the apartment was rapidly cooling. She was shivering again. Ethan moved to the living room and set the candle on the coffee table. He sat on the couch and she sat next to him. Close. Closer than she had been before. She leaned into him. It wasn't a calculated move. It was an instinctual seek for warmth. Her shoulder pressed against his arm. He could feel the cold radiating off her. But underneath, there was that humming vibration of her biology. Ethan felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with the power grid. He was intensely aware of her. The smell of her hair, like rain and ozone. The rise and fall of her chest. He felt a sudden raw flare of desire. It was shocking in its intensity. He wanted to put his arm around her. He wanted to touch the glowing line on her cheek. He clenched his hands into fists in his lap. He felt ashamed. She was a fugitive. She was vulnerable. She was trusting him to protect her, not to ogle her. Lyra turned her head. Her face was inches from his. "Your heart," she said softly. "It is beating very fast." Ethan looked straight ahead at the flickering candle flame. "I know," he gritted out. "Are you in distress?" she asked. "Is my proximity causing you discomfort?" Ethan closed his eyes. Honesty. She valued honesty. "No," he said, his voice rough. "Not discomfort." "Then what?" Ethan turned to look at her. The candlelight reflected in her starry eyes, making them look like galaxies caught in a jar. "I find you beautiful, Lyra," he admitted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "And it scares the hell out of me. Because I shouldn't. Because you're scared and you're running for your life. And I'm just the guy with the car. It feels wrong to want something from you." Silence stretched between them, thick and warm. Lyra did not pull away. Instead, she reached out. She took his clenched fist and gently pried his fingers open. She placed his palm flat against her chest, right over her sternum, where a complex knot of bioluminescence swirled. "In my culture," she said, her voice low and steady, "desire is not a theft. You do not take it from someone. You build it with them." She looked deep into his eyes. "It is not shameful to want, Ethan. It is only shameful if you do not respect the one you want. Do you respect me?" "Yes," Ethan breathed. "God, yes, then do not be afraid of your own heart." He looked at his hand on her chest. He could feel the warmth of her skin and the cool tingle of the light beneath it. He moved his thumb, tracing the line of the glow. She leaned her head forward, her forehead resting against his. They stayed like that for a long time, breathing the same air, suspended in the bubble of candlelight. They did not kiss. It felt too big for that yet. But the barrier between them, the wall of species and circumstance, had crumbled. Ethan realized, with a terrifying certainty, that he was no longer just helping a refugee. He was falling in love with her. The reality of the world outside crashed back in the next morning. The power had returned, and with it, the hum of the city. Ethan stood by the window, peering through the blinds. He had been doing this every hour. There was a black van parked down the street. It had been there for 3 hours. It had no markings, no license plate on the front. Above the roof of the opposing building, a drone hovered. It wasn't a delivery drone. It was a sleek, matte black quadcopter with a sensor array that looked like a spider's eyes. Ethan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. They were here. "Lyra," he said, "come here, don't stand in front of the glass." Lyra came to the side of the window, peering out from the angle. She stiffened. "Seeker drones," she whispered. "They are scanning for thermal signatures that do not match human baselines." Ethan turned to her. "Can they see you in here?" "Not yet," she said. "The walls are thick, but if they narrow the grid—" She looked at him, and her face was pale. "Ethan, there is something I have not told you." Ethan braced himself. "What?" "I am not just carrying memories," she said. "Before I escaped the facility, I accessed the central node. I downloaded the transit maps. The transit maps. The routes," she said urgently. "The smuggling lanes they used to traffic my people. And the communication logs between the council and your leaders. I have the proof. Ethan, it is encoded in my neural patterns. Ethan stared at her. You're not just a fugitive. You're the evidence. If they catch me, she said, tears forming in her eyes, they will not just imprison me. They will wipe my mind, they will erase the map, and the trade will continue forever. She took a step back. I have to leave. If I stay, I endanger you. Ethan looked at the black van outside. He looked at his cluttered apartment, at the life he had built, the safe, boring, cowardly life. He thought about the sustainability reports. He thought about Maya leaving him. He thought about the feeling of Lyra's heartbeat under his hand. No, he said. Lyra blinked. No, you're not leaving, Ethan said. We are leaving. Ethan. No, listen to me. He crossed the room and grabbed her shoulders. If you go out there alone, they catch you in an hour. You don't know the world. You don't know how to hide. I cannot ask you to do this, she said. You have a life here. I have a job here, Ethan corrected. I have a lease here. That's not a life. He looked around the apartment. It suddenly looked like a set on a stage he was done performing on. My whole life. I've been waiting for permission to do something real, he said. I've been afraid to choose. Well, I'm choosing now. I'm choosing you. And I'm choosing to burn their whole damn operation to the ground. Lyra searched his face, looking for the fear. She found it, but she saw the resolve sitting on top of it. Okay, she whispered. Ethan let go of her and clapped his hands together. Okay, we have 10 minutes. Pack only what you can carry. He ran to the bedroom and grabbed a duffel bag. He threw in socks, t-shirts, a first aid kit, his laptop. He moved with a frantic speed, adrenaline flooding his system. He ran back to the living room. Lyra was standing by the couch. She was holding the gray hoodie, the one he had given her, the one she had been wearing when he found her. She wasn't wearing it now. She had changed into a dark jacket he had given her. She was folding the hoodie. She smoothed the fabric with agonizing care. She folded the arms in, then the hood, creating a perfect, neat square. She placed it into the bag with a reverence usually reserved for religious texts. Lyra, we have to go, Ethan urged. I am ready, she said. She looked at the apartment one last time. Thank you for the tea. Ethan, she said. Ethan grabbed the keys to the car. Don't thank me yet, no, we have to get past the van. He grabbed her hand. It was warm. Let's go. They walked out the door, leaving the empty coffee mugs and the unread books behind. Ethan didn't lock the door. He knew he wouldn't be coming back. The city limits of Sector 4 dissolved into a sprawl of rusted industrial parks and salvage yards. The skyline, usually a reassuring cage of steel and glass, faded into the rearview mirror, replaced by the endless, monotonous gray of the interstate highway. Ethan drove with his hands at the 10 and 2 positions, his knuckles white, his eyes darting to the mirrors every 15 seconds. They had been driving for 4 hours. The silence in the car was not the awkward silence of strangers, but the tense, vibrating silence of fugitives. Lyra sat in the passenger seat, wearing a pair of aviator sunglasses Ethan had bought at a gas station 3 exits back. They were too big for her face, sliding down the bridge of her nose, hiding the galaxy-swirling violet of her eyes. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, her feet bare on the dashboard, watching the world blur by. We need to change your hair, Ethan said, breaking the silence. The black vans are looking for a woman with dark hair. Yes, but they are looking for you, unique you. Lyra touched a strand of her hair. It is biological matter. Does the color alter its function? No, Ethan said. But it alters how people see you. Humans rely on pattern recognition. We change the pattern. We buy time. They pulled into a truck stop an hour later. It was a relic of the pre-corporate era, a sprawling complex of grease, diesel, and fluorescent lights. Ethan bought a box of cheap blonde hair dye, a bottle of water, and a bag of beef jerky in the cramped, graffiti-covered bathroom of the truck stop. Ethan stood guard outside the stall while Lyra worked. This smells of chemical warfare, Lyra complained from inside the stall. It's ammonia, Ethan called back, checking his watch. Just keep it on for 20 minutes. And don't get it on your skin or you'll look like a radioactive leopard. When she finally emerged, the transformation was startling. The blonde hair, choppy and uneven from where she had hacked at it with safety scissors, framed her face in a way that made her look younger, sharper. It clashed with her pale skin in a way that looked punk rock rather than alien. She adjusted the sunglasses. I look like a different iteration of myself, she said, peering into the dirty mirror. You look like a tourist who got lost on the way to a music festival. Ethan said, It's perfect. Put this on. He tossed her a t-shirt he had grabbed from the gift shop rack. It was bright pink and featured a cartoonish alligator wearing sunglasses with the text, See you later, Navigator printed in bold, cracking letters. Lyra held it up. The irony was lost on her. An alligator, she observed, an apex predator. This is a garment of power? Sure, Ethan said, steering her toward the door. Let's go with that. A garment of power. They ate at a roadside diner in a town called Oakhaven, a place that consisted of one main street and a grain silo. The diner smelled of frying onions and stale coffee. They sat in a red vinyl booth near the back. Lyra was fascinated by the laminated menu. She ran her fingers over the pictures of burgers and shakes. Why is the food captured in 2 dimensions? She asked. To show you what you're buying, Ethan said. He ordered a burger and fries. Lyra pointed to a picture of a milkshake. I require the viscous dairy suspension, she said seriously. The waitress, a woman named Barb with tired eyes and a name tag that hung crooked, looked at Lyra, then at Ethan. She wants a strawberry shake. Barb, Ethan said quickly, and a grilled cheese. When the food arrived, Lyra dissected the grilled cheese with surgical precision. She lifted the bread, examined the melted cheese, and sniffed it. Then she took a bite. Her eyes widened behind the sunglasses. It is warm, she whispered, and soft. It feels like comfort. She ate with a voracious intensity that made Ethan smile despite the dread pooling in his stomach. When the bill came, Ethan threw down a $20 bill. What is the extra paper for? Lyra asked, watching him leave the money on the table. The cost was $16. It's a tip, Ethan explained as they walked out to the car. You pay extra to the person who brought the food, to say thank you. But it is her function, Lyra argued, buckling her seatbelt. She has exchanged currency for her labor by the establishment. Why must the consumer subsidize her survival? Ethan started the car. Because the system is broken. Lyra, the establishment pays her nothing, so we pay her the rest. It's a guilt tax. Lyra frowned, looking back at the diner. Your planet is very confusing, she said. You rely on kindness to patch the holes in your greed. Ethan merged back onto the highway. That might be the most accurate description of Earth I have ever heard. The landscape shifted as afternoon bled into evening. The industrial gray gave way to rolling hills and dense, dark forests. The road stretched out like a black ribbon, empty and lonely. Ethan turned on the radio. He found a station playing classic rock, the signal fading in and out with static. A song came on, a slow, building ballad with a weeping guitar solo. Lyra stopped fidgeting. She went perfectly still. "What is this?" she asked. "It's an old song," Ethan said. "Wish You Were Here." Pink Floyd. Lyra closed her eyes. Her body began to vibrate. It wasn't a shiver, it was a low-frequency hum, like a tuning fork struck against a table. The dashboard rattled slightly. "Lyra?" Ethan asked, glancing at her. "It hurts," she said, her voice thick. "I can turn it off." "No," she said quickly. "Do not stop it. It hurts. But it is honest." She pressed her hand against the speaker on the door. "My mother used to sing," Lyra said quietly. "Not like this. We do not have instruments. We weave frequencies with our voices. She sang the history of our orbit." Ethan turned the volume down slightly, but kept it playing. "You mentioned your mother. She was the one who opposed the regime?" "She was a speaker," Lyra said. "She argued that the trade with the council was a trap. She said that once you sell your resources for comfort, you eventually sell your children for survival." She looked out the window at the passing trees. "They took her when I was 12 cycles old. They said she was destabilizing the integration. I never saw her again. I only know she is in a facility like the one I escaped from. Maybe on this world, maybe another." Ethan gripped the steering wheel. The unfairness of it made his blood hot. "I'm sorry, Lyra. I do not want pity." "Ethan," she said, turning to him, "I want to understand. You have freedom here. You have cars. You have music that makes your bones shake. Why do you let the systems own you?" Ethan sighed. "It's a slow process. You don't wake up one day in a cage. You build the cage yourself. One mortgage payment at a time. One day you realize you're 30 years old. You hate your job, and you're too afraid to quit because you need health insurance." He thought of Maya again. "My ex-girlfriend," he said. "She told me I was a coward. She said I was sleepwalking. She was right. I thought staying safe was the same thing as being alive." Lyra reached over and touched his arm. Her hand was warm, the vibrations from the music still humming through her skin. "You are not sleepwalking now." "Ethan, you are driving very fast." Ethan laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Yeah, I guess I am." Night fell with the weight of a hammer. A storm rolled in from the west, turning the sky a bruised purple and unleashing a torrent of rain that made driving nearly impossible. They pulled into the Starlight Motel, a flickering neon sign buzzing in the deluge. It was a U-shaped row of rooms with peeling paint and a vending machine that glowed like a radioactive monolith. Ethan ran into the office and came back with a key. "Only one room left," he said, shaking the rain from his hair as he climbed back into the car. "And the roof might leak." The room smelled of mildew and lemon disinfectant. There was a single bed, a queen with a sagging mattress, and a small television bolted to the wall. Lyra took off her sunglasses and the wet pink t-shirt, shivering. She pulled the oversized gray hoodie back on. It was her armor. Ethan locked the deadbolt and propped a chair under the doorknob. He moved to the small desk and opened his laptop. "I need to check something," he said. He connected to the motel's spotty Wi-Fi, routing his signal through 3 different proxy servers. He logged into a back door of the Helios Systems network he had created years ago, a lazy admin's way of working from home that he had never deleted. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, watching the news on the television. The volume was low. Citing the terrorist attack on the Sector 9 facility. Government officials are calling for the immediate implementation of the Global Security Act. This will allow for expanded surveillance of all transit networks and private communications. That is the script, Lyra said, her voice flat. Ethan looked up from his screen. What? The alien advisors, she said, pointing at the screen where a senator was speaking. They write the speeches. Whenever there is a breach, they use it to tighten the net. They create the fear, and then they sell you the cage to protect yourself from it. Ethan typed furiously. I'm in the internal memos. He scrolled through the encrypted files, his eyes widening. Here it is, he whispered. Project integration. He read the file, his face paling. It's not just a trade deal, he said. It's a terraforming project. Phase 2, atmospheric adjustment. They aren't just taking resources, Lyra. They're changing the climate to make it more comfortable for the council elites. That's why the sustainability initiative was a sham. They want the temperature to rise. He clicked another file, asset retrieval. Lyra flinched at the words. That is me, she said. Ethan read the text. Priority Alpha. Subject carries Class A encryption keys. Capture authorized. Lethal force authorized if containment fails. He slammed the laptop shut. They aren't trying to arrest you, he said. They're trying to delete you. Thunder cracked outside, shaking the thin walls of the motel room. The lights flickered, buzzed, and then died. The room plunged into darkness, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning through the thin curtains. Ethan sat in the dark, the afterimage of the computer screen burning in his retinas. He felt a sudden crushing weight of reality. He was a mid-level corporate drone. He wasn't a spy. He wasn't a soldier, and he was up against a galactic superpower. He felt the mattress shift. Ethan? Lyra's voice was small. I'm here, he said. She was glowing faintly in the dark, her markings casting a soft blue light on the cheap floral bedspread. The storm is loud, she said. Yeah, there is only one sleeping platform, she noted. Ethan swallowed. Yeah, I can sleep on the floor. I've got the car blankets. No, Lyra said. Her voice was firmer now. The floor is cold, and I do not wish to be alone in the dark. Not tonight. Ethan hesitated, then moved to the bed. He lay down on top of the covers, stiff as a board, keeping a solid foot of distance between them. Lyra crawled under the blanket, curling up on her side, facing him. The lightning flashed, illuminating her face. She was looking at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. You are afraid, she said. Terrified, Ethan admitted. Of the uniformed men. Of everything, he said. Of them finding us. Of me failing you. Of this. He gestured vaguely to the space between them. This? Lyra asked. I'm scared of how much I want to be here, Ethan whispered. I'm scared that if I touch you, I'm just another person using you. You've been used your whole life. Lyra, I don't want to be part of that list. Lyra reached out, her hand, cool and glowing, touched his cheek. Ethan, she said. Do you know what the worst part of the prison was? No. It was that they did not care what I wanted. I was an object, a vessel for data, a laborer. My want was irrelevant. She moved closer, the distance between them shrinking to inches, to ask for what I want. That is the only freedom I have left. And I am asking you. Ethan turned his head, his nose brushing against hers. He could smell the rain on her skin and the faint ozone scent of her energy. What do you want, Lyra? He asked, his voice breaking. I want to be seen, she whispered, not as a refugee, not as a navigator, just Lyra. And I want you to be the one looking. She closed the gap. The kiss was not like in the movies. It wasn't smooth or practiced. It was tentative, almost clumsy with hesitation. Her lips were cool, but her mouth was soft. Ethan froze for a heartbeat, his brain screaming at him to stop, to protect her, to be noble. But then he felt her hand slide into his hair, gripping tight, pulling him closer. He groaned, a low sound in his throat, and kissed her back. It was slow, painfully slow. It was a question and an answer repeated over and over. Ethan's hand found her waist, his thumb tracing the ridge of her hip bone through the thick cotton of the hoodie. He felt the vibration of her skin, the hum of her life force against his palm. It was overwhelming. The sensory input was too much, the storm outside, the glow of her skin, the taste of her. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. He pulled back, gasping for air. Their foreheads rested against each other. "Is this acceptable?" Lyra asked, her breath hitching. "More than acceptable," Ethan whispered. It's everything." He wanted to pull her closer. He wanted to lose himself in her. But the file on the computer screen flashed in his mind. Lethal force authorized. "We have to stop," he said, his voice ragged. Lyra nodded against him. "Yes. The energy, it is too high. If we continue, I might burn." She meant it metaphorically, but looking at the way her markings were flaring bright white, Ethan thought she might mean it literally too. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest. She buried her face in his neck. They lay there, fully clothed, hearts racing in unison, holding on to each other like two drowning sailors clinging to a piece of driftwood. The restraint didn't make it less intimate. It made it sacred. It was a promise. We are here. We are real. And we are waiting. The morning sun was brutal, exposing the peeling wallpaper of the motel room. They left before checkout, grabbing terrible coffee from the lobby. "We need help," Ethan said as they got back on the highway. "I can't decrypt the rest of these files. And we need someone who knows how to get this story out without getting us killed." He navigated toward the mountains. "I know a guy," Ethan said. "His name is Miller. He was my mentor when I first started in journalism, before I sold out to corporate. He lives off the grid. If anyone can help us, it's him." Miller lived in a cabin at the end of a dirt road that didn't appear on GPS. As they pulled up, an old man with a gray beard and a shotgun slung over his shoulder stepped out onto the porch. Ethan got out of the car, hands up. "Miller, it's me, Ethan." The old man squinted. "Ethan, you look like hell, and you're driving a Honda. I told you to buy a truck." Miller lowered the gun but didn't smile. "Who's the girl?" "This is Lyra," Ethan said, "and we need to come inside, now, inside." The cabin was a fortress of paper, and stacks of newspapers, files, and printed emails lined every wall. Miller poured them whiskey, even though it was 10 in the morning. "So," Miller grunted, sitting in his armchair, "you want to tell me why Helios Systems has a level 5 warrant out for your arrest?" Ethan looked at Lyra. "Show him." Lyra stood up. She took off the sunglasses. She rolled up her sleeves. Miller's eyes widened. He sat forward, the whiskey glass forgotten in his hand. "Holy Mother of God," he whispered. Lyra closed her eyes. She placed her fingertips against her temples. "I can project the data," she said, "but I need a surface." "Use the wall," Miller said, gesturing to a clear patch of plaster. Lyra inhaled. The markings on her arms flared. Beams of light projected from her skin, not like a flashlight, but like a biological fiber optic transmission. The light hit the wall and resolved into crisp, holographic text and diagrams. It was the map, the trade routes, the list of politicians on the payroll, the blueprints for the atmospheric processors. Miller stood up and walked to the wall, touching the light. This is it, he muttered. The smoking gun. I've been chasing rumors of this for 20 years. The feeder world theory. Feeder world? Ethan asked. Miller turned. It's a colonial model. You don't conquer a planet. You integrate it. You suck the resources out slowly. Use the population for cheap labor, and keep them distracted with gadgets and entertainment until the planet is dry. Then you move on. He looked at Lyra. And you're the receipt. Miller went to his desk and started pulling out hard drives. We can't just upload this, he said. They monitor the web. As soon as we broadcast, they'll triangulate the signal and drop a missile on us. We need to hijack a global feed, something they can't shut down instantly. Like what? Ethan asked. The emergency broadcast system, Miller said, or a satellite override. But we need a transmitter strong enough to push through their firewalls. He looked at Lyra. You said you're a navigator. Can you interface with human tech? I can. Speak to it, Lyra said. If the signal is strong enough, Miller nodded grimly. Then we have a chance. But you need to know something. He pulled up a monitor on his desk. It showed a satellite view of the region. A red dot was blinking, moving steadily toward their location. They're tracking you, Miller said. How? Ethan asked. I ditched my phone. I'm using proxies. The car, Miller said. Modern cars have black boxes. They ping the satellites every hour. They know you're here. You have maybe 20 minutes before a strike team lands on my front lawn. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. We have to run, he said. Lyra stood still, looking at the map on the wall. She looked tired. Her light was dimming. Maybe I should stop, she said softly. Ethan turned to her. What? If I surrender, she said, looking at Miller, then Ethan. If I give myself up, maybe they will let you go. You are just a human who made a mistake. I am the asset. She looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with tears. I do not want you to die for me. Ethan crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed her face in his hands. Listen to me, he said fiercely. There is no version of this where I let them take you. Do you understand? No version. But the risk? I don't care about the risk, Ethan shouted, his voice cracking. I care about you. We started this together. We finish it together. I am not letting you go back to being a thing in a box. Lyra looked at him, searching for the lie. She found only a desperate, terrifying love. Okay, she whispered. Miller racked the slide of his shotgun. Touching moment, he grumbled. Now get out of here, I'll hold them off. I've got a few surprises buried in the driveway. Miller. No, Ethan said. Go, Miller roared. Take the back trail. Head for the climate facility in the north. That's the hub. If you can get her there, she can hijack the main array. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. Thank you, Miller. Don't thank me, the old man said, lighting a cigarette. Just make sure it's worth it. Ethan and Lyra ran out the back door, plunging into the forest just as the sound of rotors chopped the air in the distance. They didn't look back. They ran toward the trees, hand in hand, running toward the truth and toward the end of the world as they knew it. The Global Climate Stabilization Array sat on the edge of the northern wilderness like a needle piercing the sky. To the untrained human eye, it was a marvel of green engineering, a sleek white spire surrounded by acres of solar farms and atmospheric scrubbers, designed to regulate the planet's erratic weather patterns. It was the crown jewel of Helios systems, a monument to human ingenuity and corporate benevolence. To Lyra, it was a shackle. They were parked 2 miles away, hidden in a dense copse of pine trees that smelled of resin and damp earth. Ethan had the binoculars pressed to his eyes, scanning the perimeter fence. "It is a tether," Lyra said, her voice tight. She was sitting on the hood of the Honda, knees drawn up. She was not looking at the facility with binoculars. She was feeling it. The bioluminescent markings on her neck were pulsing in an agitated staccato rhythm, hidden only by the high collar of her jacket. "What do you mean?" "A tether," Ethan asked, lowering the glasses. "It does not just scrub the air. Ethan, it connects. That spire goes up past your atmosphere. It anchors a geosynchronous station. That is where the ships dock. That is where they offload the heavy equipment and unload the biological assets." Ethan looked back at the white tower. It looked innocent. It looked like the future. "So it's a space elevator," he said, "disguised as a glorified air purifier." "It is the throat of the beast," Lyra said, "and we have to crawl inside it." The plan was simple, reckless, and terrifying. The facility offered daily educational tours to the public, a PR stunt to show taxpayers where their money was going. They would go in as tourists, blend with the herd, and then Lyra would sense the location of the central data core. Once there, she could interface directly with the alien architecture hidden beneath the human facade and broadcast the truth to the world. Ethan put the binoculars down. His hands were shaking slightly. He clenched them into fists to hide it. "Okay," he said. "Here is how we do this. We go in on the 10 o'clock tour. I have the fake IDs Miller printed. You wear the hat and the sunglasses. You do not speak to anyone. If security asks questions, I answer. If we get separated, you go back to the car." Lyra frowned, sliding off the hood of the car. "If we get separated, I proceed to the objective," she corrected him. "No," Ethan snapped. It was sharper than he intended. "No. If we get separated, the mission is aborted. You get out. I will create a distraction." Lyra turned to face him, her boots crunching on the pine needles. "You are altering the parameters," she said. "The priority is the data. The priority is stopping the integration. The priority is you breathing," Ethan shouted. The sound of his voice echoed in the quiet forest, startling a flock of crows from the trees. Ethan raked a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth. "Look, Lyra, you don't know how these corporate security teams work. They don't just arrest people. They disappear them. I am not going to let you walk into a meat grinder while I stand by and watch. You stay behind me. You let me handle the risks." Lyra stepped into his path, stopping his pacing. Her face was set in a hard, angry line. "I am not a parcel, Ethan. I didn't say you were. You are treating me like cargo," she interrupted, her voice rising. "You want to wrap me in bubble wrap and carry me through the fire. But I am fireproof. Ethan, you are the one who burns. I'm trying to keep you safe. You are trying to control me." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Lyra took a step closer, her eyes flashing behind the cheap sunglasses. "My whole life," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and hurt. "My whole life. Others have decided where I stand, where I go, what I am worth. The council used me as a battery. The prison used me as data. And now you? You want to use me as a protected object?" "That is not fair," Ethan said, stung. "I love you. That is why I'm doing this." "Is it?" Lyra asked. "Or are you doing it because you are terrified of being alone again? Are you protecting me? Or are you hoarding me?" Ethan recoiled as if she had slapped him. He opened his mouth to defend himself, to cite his bravery, his sacrifice. But the words died in his throat because the truth of what she said pierced him. He was terrified. He was not just afraid of her dying. He was afraid of the silence returning to his apartment. He was afraid of the empty coat hanger where her hoodie now lived. Lyra saw the hesitation in his eyes. She let out a frustrated, choked sound and turned away. I need space, she said. Do not follow me. She stormed off into the trees, moving with that unnatural, fluid grace that made her seem like a ghost passing through the undergrowth. Ethan stood alone by the car. The silence of the forest rushed back in, but now it felt accusatory. He kicked the tire of the Honda hard. Damn it. Night fell over the forest, bringing a chill that seeped into the bones. Ethan waited by the car for an hour, then 2. He paced. He checked his watch. He reorganized the duffel bag 3 times. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He locked the car and walked into the woods, following the faint trail of broken twigs Lyra had left behind. He found her a half-mile away, sitting on the bank of a rushing river. The water was black and fast, churning over rocks. Lyra was sitting on a large, flat stone, her knees pulled to her chest. She had taken off her jacket. The night was cold, but she didn't seem to feel it. The bioluminescence on her skin was active, reflecting the constellations above. Ethan approached slowly, making sure to step heavy so she would hear him. He stopped 10 feet away. I didn't come to bring you back, he said softly. I just came to make sure you weren't gone. Lyra did not turn around. She stared at the water, where the reflection of the stars was broken and scattered by the current. I am scared. Ethan, she said. Her voice was barely audible over the sound of the river. I know, Ethan said. We're both scared. No, she said, I am not scared of the facility. No, I am scared of this, of us. She turned to look at him. Her face was illuminated by the soft blue glow of her own markings. In the prison, she said, they told us that attachment was a weakness. They said that if you love something, you give your enemy a handle to hold you by. She touched her chest. When you try to shield me, when you try to stand in front of me, I feel that handle tightening. I feel like I am becoming a liability. And I hate it. I want to be a weapon. Ethan, I want to be strong, but with you, I feel soft. Ethan walked over to the rock. He didn't sit next to her immediately. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking down at her. You're not a liability. Lyra, you're the point. He took a breath, the cold air filling his lungs. You were right. Back at the car, I was being controlling. I told myself it was for your safety, but it was for my sanity. I look at you, and I see the only real thing that has ever happened to me. And the thought of losing that makes me want to lock you in a tower and swallow the key. He sat down on the edge of the rock, leaving a foot of space between them. But that is not love, he said. That is possession. And I swore I wouldn't do that to you. Lyra looked at him. The defensive tension in her shoulders began to dissolve. I do not want to be safe. Ethan, she whispered. I want to be free, even if that means I am in danger. Ethan nodded. He reached out his hand, palm up, resting it on the cold stone between them. Okay, he said. Then we do it your way. We go in together, side by side. If we get separated, you go for the core. You finish the mission. I will handle myself. Lyra looked at his hand. Then she looked at his face. You promise? She asked. I promise. Partners. Not protector and protected. Partners. Lyra shifted. She moved across the stone and placed her hand in his. Her skin was cool, vibrating with that familiar hum. She interlaced her fingers with his. Thank you, she said. She leaned in, her eyes searching his. The distance between them vanished. This time when they kissed, it wasn't tentative. It was urgent. It was hungry. Lyra made a sound in the back of her throat. a soft trill that was entirely alien and entirely beautiful, and pulled him closer. Ethan's hands found her waist, pulling her against him. He could feel the heat of her markings through her thin shirt. He ran his hand up her back, tangling his fingers in her short, dyed hair. Lyra pushed him back against the stone surface. She straddled his lap, her movements fluid and strong. She kissed his jaw, his neck, her hands roaming over his chest, gripping his jacket as if she were trying to anchor herself to the earth through him. Ethan's heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wanted her. He wanted her with a ferocity that blurred the edges of his vision. But he pulled back, just an inch, his breathing ragged. "Lyra," he gasped. Are you okay?" Lyra stopped. Her chest was heaving, her eyes were blown wide, the stars within them swirling in a chaotic dance. She looked at him, breathless. "Yes," she whispered. "I am choosing this. I am choosing you." She leaned back in, pressing her forehead against his. "But," she said, her voice trembling, "if we do this now, here, I will not be able to focus on the mission, the connection. It is too strong. It consumes everything." Ethan closed his eyes, resting his hands on her hips. He understood. The air between them was so charged it felt like a physical weight. If they crossed that line now, they might never make it to the facility. They would burn the world down just to stay in this moment. "We wait," Ethan said, his voice straining with the effort. Lyra nodded against him. "We wait." Ethan opened his eyes. He looked at her, fierce, glowing, terrifyingly beautiful. "But we survive this," he said, making it a vow. "We survive this, and then we figure out the rest. We go home, and we lock the door, and we don't come out for a week." Lyra smiled, a genuine, sharp smile. "A week seems insufficient," she said. Ethan laughed, a breathless, shaky sound. He kissed her once more, soft and lingering, a promise sealed in the cold night air. "Okay," he said, helping her stand up. "Let's go steal a space elevator." The lobby of the Global Climate Stabilization Array was a cathedral of glass and white marble. It smelled of ozone and expensive espresso. A holographic globe rotated slowly in the center of the atrium, displaying happy green readouts of the Earth's atmosphere. Ethan adjusted the brim of his "I love clean air" baseball cap. He felt ridiculous. He felt exposed. Lyra walked beside him, wearing a pair of dark sunglasses and a thick scarf that covered her neck. She moved stiffly, forcing herself to mimic the casual, heavy gait of a human tourist. "Welcome, everyone," a tour guide chirped. She was a young woman with a smile that looked like it had been surgically applied. "I'm Sarah, and I'll be showing you how Helios Systems is saving our future." There were about 20 people in the group, families, retirees, a class of bored teenagers. Ethan and Lyra stood at the back. "Please keep your visitor badges visible at all times," Sarah said, scanning a key card to open a set of massive glass doors. "And remember, no photography in the server wings." They shuffled forward. Lyra leaned close to Ethan. "I can hear it," she whispered. "What?" "The hum. It is underneath the floor. It is screaming." "Keep your head down," Ethan murmured. They moved through the public galleries. They saw displays about carbon capture and cloud seeding. It was all very impressive, and all completely fake. As the group moved toward the observation deck, Ethan saw what they were looking for: a maintenance door. It was unassuming, painted the same sterile white as the walls, but it had a heavy-duty keypad lock. Ethan tapped Lyra's arm. Lyra nodded. She waited until the group was distracted by a large window overlooking the solar fields. Sarah, the guide, was pointing excitedly at a drone swarm. "Now," Ethan whispered. They slipped away from the back of the pack. Ethan stood in front of Lyra to block the view of the security cameras while she placed her hand over the keypad. She didn't type a code. She just pressed her palm flat against the plastic. Her skin flared beneath her sleeve. A pulse of blue light shot from her hand into the lock. The keypad didn't beep. It just died. The light went out, and the magnetic lock disengaged with a heavy thud. Lyra pushed the door open, and they slipped inside. The difference was immediate. The hallway beyond was not white marble. It was dark, constructed of a seamless, matte gray metal that seemed to absorb the light. The air was colder here, and it vibrated with a low, throbbing bass note that Ethan could feel in his teeth. "This is council architecture," Lyra said, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes were glowing in the dim light. "We are inside the beast." They ran. The corridors were a maze. There were no signs, no arrows, but Lyra knew the way. She moved with certainty, following the magnetic pull of the data core. Ethan checked his phone. No signal. "We're deep," he said. Suddenly, a siren blared. Not a ringing bell, but a digital shriek that sounded like a tearing sheet of metal. "Foreign biologicals detected in Sector 4. A synthetic voice announced, "Containment protocols initiated." "They know," Ethan said. Ahead of them, the corridor ended in a T-junction. Two spherical drones dropped from the ceiling, their red eyes scanning. "Ethan!" Lyra shouted. She didn't stop running. She didn't turn back. She sprinted toward the wall. "Lyra, that's a wall!" Ethan yelled. Lyra slammed her hand against a panel on the wall. "Gravity shift!" she screamed. The world flipped. Ethan's stomach slammed into his throat. Down became left. The wall became the floor. Lyra kept running, her momentum carrying her seamlessly onto the new floor. Ethan stumbled, flailing, and fell hard against the metal surface that had been a wall a second ago. He scrambled to his feet. The drones were confusingly trying to reorient themselves, their gyroscopes whining. "Run!" Lyra called, reaching back for him. Ethan sprinted. It was a nightmare of physics. They were running on the walls, spiraling down a shaft that should have been vertical. The drones fired bolts of stun energy that sizzled against the metal where Ethan's head had been a second before. Ethan pulled out his laptop as he ran, plugging a cable into a wall port Lyra pointed out. "I'm scrambling their visual feed," he shouted, typing with one hand while balancing on the shifting gravity plane. "I'm looping the camera footage from 10 minutes ago." The drones hesitated, their red eyes blinking. "It worked," Ethan yelled. They burst through a final set of blast doors and tumbled into a vast, circular chamber. The gravity normalized instantly, dropping them both to the floor. Ethan groaned, rolling over. "Holy hell!" He wheezed. "I am never complaining about an elevator again." He looked up. They were in the core. It was a cavernous room, dominated by a massive pillar of light in the center. The pillar wasn't empty space. It was a solid beam of data, swirling with millions of symbols and streams of code. It stretched up through the ceiling, presumably all the way to the space elevator tether. "This is it," Lyra whispered. "The brain." She stood up, shedding her jacket. Her arms were fully exposed now, the silver tattoos shifting rapidly, swirling like liquid mercury. "Cover me," she said. She walked toward the beam of light. Ethan scrambled behind a console, pulling out a stun baton he had swiped from the maintenance closet. It felt like a toothpick against the technology surrounding them. Lyra stepped into the light. She didn't burn. She absorbed it. She threw her head back and screamed, a sound of pure, overwhelming connection. Her body became a conduit. The blue light of her markings turned a blinding white. The room began to shake. On the massive screens lining the walls, The fake weather data vanished. It was replaced by streams of alien text. Schematics of the terraforming engines, lists of human names, bank accounts, shipping manifests for biological cargo. "It's working," Ethan shouted over the roar of energy. "You're doing it." Suddenly, the screens flickered. The flow of data stopped. A giant holographic projection materialized in the center of the room, dwarfing them both. It was a table, a meeting table. Seated around it were shadowy figures, some human, in suits, others not. The aliens were tall, elegant and terrifying, with elongated limbs and faces that looked like porcelain masks. One of them stood up. It looked down at Lyra, who was kneeling in the beam of light, trembling with effort. "Stop," the alien voice boomed. It wasn't spoken, it was projected directly into their skulls. Lyra looked up, her eyes bleeding light. "I will not stop," she gritted out. The alien stepped closer in the hologram. Its face was impassive, but its voice carried a ripple of recognition. "You are not a random stray," the alien observed. "I know that frequency. You are the offspring of Unit 734, the speaker." Lyra froze. "Yes," the alien mused. "You are Ileana's daughter. We have been looking for you. Your mother has been quite stubborn in the labor camps. Perhaps she requires motivation." Lyra's concentration shattered. "Mother?" she whispered. The connection to the data beam faltered. The light around her dimmed. "Surrender," the alien commanded, "or the speaker is decommissioned within the hour." Ethan stood up from behind the console. "Don't listen to him," he shouted. "It's a trick." The blast doors behind them hissed open. A squad of armored soldiers poured in. They weren't holding stun guns. They were holding military-grade pulse rifles. Lyra collapsed. The energy overload combined with the shock cut her strings. She hit the floor, the light in her skin fading to a dull, bruised gray. "Lyra!" Ethan sprinted across the room. He slid on his knees, scooping her up into his arms. She was burning hot, feverish. "Ethan," she mumbled, her eyes fluttering. "My mother." "Shh, I've got you," Ethan said, pulling her close. He looked up. They were surrounded. A dozen laser sights dotted his chest and Lyra's back. The holographic alien loomed over them, watching with cold curiosity. "Secure the asset," the alien ordered. "Process the human." Ethan tightened his grip on Lyra, feeling her heart flutter against his chest like a dying bird. He looked at the guns, then at the alien, and finally down at Lyra. He didn't let go. The consciousness returned to Ethan not as a sunrise, but as a bucket of ice water dumped over his soul. He was seated in a chair that felt less like furniture and more like a medical instrument, contoured to grip his spine and immobilize his limbs. The restraints were invisible, fields of heavy pressurized air that pinned his wrists and ankles to the metal armrests. He opened his eyes. He was floating. Or rather, the room was floating. The walls were made of a transparent, high-tensile polymer that looked out onto a sea of white clouds. Above the clouds, the sky was a bruised, dark indigo, thinning into the black of space. He was in the upper atmosphere. They were on the sky platform. A door hissed open behind him. The sound was pneumatic and expensive. Ethan twisted his neck as far as the pressure field would allow. A man walked in. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Ethan's entire college education, cut from a fabric that seemed to repel the sterile light of the room. Ethan recognized him immediately. It was Silas Vance, the chief operating officer of Helios Systems, the man whose signature was on Ethan's paychecks. Vance pulled up a sleek metal stool and sat down, crossing his legs. He looked bored. "You have caused a significant amount of overhead." "Ethan," Vance said. Do you have any idea how much a gravity-stabilized interrogation unit costs to operate per hour? Ethan tested the invisible bonds. They held fast. I assume you can write it off as a business expense, Ethan rasped. Under human trafficking or maybe planetary treason, Vance sighed, smoothing the crease in his trousers. You are melodramatic. That is the problem with your generation. You want everything to be a moral crusade. The universe is not moral, Ethan. It is transactional. Vance tapped a holographic interface on his wrist. A screen materialized in the air between them. It showed a bank account, Ethan's bank account. But the number was wrong. It had 7 zeros added to the end. $5 million, Vance said. New identity. A nice condo in New Zealand, in one of the preserved zones where the air is still sweet. You walk away. You say the girl was a hallucinations caused by stress. You go live a life of comfort. And Lyra? Ethan asked. The asset is being processed, Vance said dismissively. She is broken hardware. Ethan, she is glitching. We are just going to wipe the drive and put her back to work. It is cleaner that way. Ethan looked at the money on the screen. Then he looked at Vance. He saw the utter lack of humanity in the man's eyes. It wasn't malice. It was indifference. To Vance, Lyra was not a person. She was a row in a spreadsheet that refused to balance. I saw the files, Ethan said, his voice steady. I saw the donation bins, the charity fronts. You are using the poor to feed them. You are taking people who won't be missed and shipping them off-world like cattle. Vance shrugged. Earth is overpopulated. The council needs labor. We need technology. It is a symbiotic relationship. We keep the population here polarized, distracted, fighting over scraps and politics, while the adults in the room handle the real business. Do you think we want Earth to advance? If humanity united, we would be a threat. Kept like this, we are a useful garden. He leaned forward. Take the money, Ethan. If you don't, I will have the technicians simulate a neural ghost of you. We will upload it into the girl's mind. She will spend the rest of her existence watching a simulation of you betraying her. Over and over again, while we strip mine her memories. I will break her heart to break her code. Ethan felt a cold rage settle in his gut, heavier than gravity. Go to hell, Ethan said. Vance stood up. He looked disappointed but not surprised. Technicians, he called out to the empty room. Proceed with the erasure. Lyra was not in a chair. She was suspended in a beam of amber light, her toes inches from the floor. The light did not burn, but it hummed with a frequency that made her teeth ache. It dampened her bioluminescence, turning the constellations on her skin into dull, gray scars. She was not alone. The alien standing before her was tall, draped in robes that shifted color like oil on water. Its face was a mask of pale, ceramic-like chitin, featureless save for 2 vertical slits where eyes should be. It was the overseer. Your mother was stubborn, the overseer said. Its voice did not travel through the air, it vibrated directly against the bones of Lyra's skull. She believed that freedom was an inherent state of matter. She was incorrect. Matter seeks order. Gravity binds and stars align. Chaos is an aberration. Slavery is not order, Lyra whispered, her head hanging low. It is theft. It is efficiency, the overseer corrected. We have brought stability to 1,000 worlds. We take the excess population, the unwanted, the drifts, and we give them purpose. We give your leaders longevity. We give your planet a role in the great machine. You are a cog that thinks it is the engine. The amber light intensified. Lyra gasped as a wave of psychic pressure slammed into her mind. Images flooded her vision. not memories but fabrications. She saw Ethan. He was standing in a high-rise office, wearing a suit like Vance's. He was laughing, holding a glass of champagne. He was shaking hands with the overseer. "He sold you," the voice in her head whispered. He was tired of the fear. He realized you were just a burden. He chose the money. Look at him. He is happy without you. "No," Lyra gritted out, closing her eyes. "He is human," the voice insisted. "Humans are fragile. They break." He broke. He gave us the encryption key. He is watching us right now, waiting for you to stop fighting so he can get his payment. The image shifted. She saw Ethan walking away from her cell, not looking back. She felt the crushing weight of abandonment, the cold, hollow ache she had known her whole life in the camps. "It is a lie," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "Is it?" Lyra focused. She did not focus on the pain or the fear. She focused on a sensation, the smell of rain on a cheap motel parking lot, the warmth of a hand pressing against her chest, the sound of a man's heart racing, not out of fear but out of awe. "I know his heart," Lyra said, lifting her head. Her eyes, though dimmed, sparked with a defiant violet light. "He is afraid. He is soft, but he is real, and he would not sell me." The overseer tilted its head. "Then we shall see which breaks first, the carbon or the starlight." The cell door to Ethan's holding tank beeped. He braced himself for another round of Vance's sales pitch or a torture droid. Instead, a young man in a gray maintenance jumpsuit slipped inside. He looked terrified. He was holding a data pad and shaking hands. His name tag read, "Kale." "Don't make a sound," Kale hissed as he tapped a sequence into the armrest of Ethan's chair. The pressure fields vanished. Ethan slumped forward, catching himself before he hit the floor. "Who are you?" Ethan whispered, rubbing his wrists. "My sister," Kyle said, his eyes darting to the door. Her name was Sarah. She disappeared 3 years ago. They said she ran away. I found her name on a manifest in the waste disposal logs yesterday. He looked at Ethan, his face pale and sweaty. They shipped her to a mining colony in the Proxima Belt. She died of radiation sickness 6 months ago. Ethan put a hand on the kid's shoulder. "I am sorry." "Make them pay," Kale said, handing Ethan a stun baton he had pulled from his belt. "I have looped the camera feed for this block. You have 10 minutes before the shift change. The girl is in cell block Delta, down the main corridor, left at the gravity lift." "What about the escape?" Ethan asked. "I am going to flush the coolant system in the primary generator," Kale said. "It will trigger a station-wide reboot. The gravity fields will destabilize. It is going to get messy. Use the chaos." "You come with us," Ethan said. Kale shook his head. "I have to be at the console to override the lockdown. Just get the truth out. That is all I want." Ethan nodded. He gripped the stun baton. "Thank you, Kale. Go." Ethan ran. The corridor to cell block Delta was a sterile white tube. Ethan moved fast, keeping low. He encountered 2 guards at the checkpoint. They were relaxed, expecting no trouble on a secure station 40,000 feet in the air. Ethan didn't hesitate. He wasn't the passive office worker anymore. He was a man who had seen the machinery of the world and decided to break it. He swung the baton, taking the first guard in the knee, then the neck. As the second guard raised his rifle, Ethan threw himself forward, tackling him. They hit the floor. Ethan jammed the baton into the guard's chest plate, discharging the capacitor. The guard seized and went limp. Ethan scrambled up, grabbed the guard's keycard, and swiped it at the door labeled Subject 734B. The door hissed open. Lyra fell out. The amber field had deactivated the moment the door opened. She stumbled forward, her legs weak. Ethan caught her. The impact of their bodies colliding was the only thing in the universe that made sense. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, crushing her to him. She clung to his jacket, burying her face in his neck, breathing in sharp, ragged gasps. "You are here," she sobbed. "They showed me. They said you left." "I am never leaving," Ethan whispered fiercely into her hair. "I am right here. I am real." He pulled back just enough to look at her. She looked exhausted. The glow on her skin was faint, pulsing with an irregular rhythm, but her eyes were clear. "We have to move," Ethan said. "But first..." He dragged her into a small supply alcove across the hall and hit the lock. It was a tiny space, smelling of ozone and cleaning fluid. They were safe for a heartbeat. He looked at her, and the adrenaline mixed with something hotter, deeper. They were 40,000 feet in the air, surrounded by enemies, likely about to die, and all he wanted was to be closer to her. Lyra looked at him, and he saw the same hunger mirrored in her eyes. It wasn't just relief. It was a desperate, clawing need to affirm life in the face of erasure. She grabbed the lapels of his jacket and pulled him down. The kiss was collision. It was raw, unpolished, and desperate. Ethan's hands tangled in her choppy, dyed blonde hair. Lyra's hands roamed over his chest, her palms flaring with heat, the markings on her skin burning bright enough to shine through his shirt. "Ethan," she breathed against his mouth. I want everything." "I know," Ethan gasped. He kissed her jaw, her neck, feeling the hum of her energy against his lips. "God, Lyra, I want you." He pressed her back against the cool metal wall. Her legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him in. The friction, the heat, the danger. It was a drug. He wanted to forget the conspiracy. He wanted to forget the aliens. He wanted to stay in this alcove and exist only in the sensation of her skin against his. Lyra pressed her forehead against his, her breath mingling with his. Her bioluminescence was pulsing rapidly, a chaotic staccato of light in the dim room. "They tried to own me," she whispered, her voice fierce and trembling. "They tried to make my body a tool. To want you, to choose this, it feels like the ultimate rebellion. It feels like I am stealing myself back." Ethan looked into her eyes. He saw the fire there. He saw the love, and he saw the mission. If they stopped now, if they surrendered to this desire completely, the window would close. Kale's distraction would fail. The truth would die with them. Ethan rested his forehead against hers. He smoothed her hair back, his hands shaking with the effort of not touching her everywhere at once. "Then let's use it," he whispered. "Let's take this fire and burn their whole world down with it." Lyra nodded, tears standing in her eyes. She slowly lowered her legs, sliding back down to stand on the floor. She kept her hands on his chest, anchoring herself. "We survive," she said, echoing his promise from the forest. "We survive, and then we figure out the rest," Ethan finished. He kissed her once more, hard, quick, a seal on the pact. "Ready?" Lyra took a deep breath. Her markings flared, stabilizing into a steady, combat-ready glow. "Ready!" The lights in the corridor turned red. A siren began to wail. Then, the floor dropped out from under them. Kale had triggered the reboot. The artificial gravity generator stuttered and failed. Ethan and Lyra floated up off the deck plates. Down the hall, a squad of soldiers turned the corner. They shouted in confusion as they began to drift, their boots losing magnetic adhesion. They flailed, spinning in the air. "Now!" Ethan yelled. He pushed off the wall, launching himself like a torpedo down the corridor. He wasn't a soldier, but he understood zero-G physics from a dozen flight simulator games he used to play when he was lonely. The soldiers were trained for gravity. They were panicking. Ethan collided with the lead soldier, using the momentum to slam the man into the ceiling. He grabbed the soldier's rifle, not to shoot. He didn't know how to unlock the biometric safety, but to use as a club. "Gravity is a suggestion," Ethan shouted, laughing with a manic edge as he swung the rifle stock into a helmet. Lyra was a dancer in the chaos. She didn't just float, she maneuvered. She pushed off surfaces with precision. She extended her hands, and waves of kinetic force, her natural navigation defense, rippled out. She didn't hit the soldiers. She hit the air around them. She created localized pressure pockets that sent the guards spinning wildly, crashing into walls and each other. "The comm node is 2 levels up," Lyra shouted, orienting herself upside down relative to Ethan. "Or, down. The orientation is irrelevant. Up is wherever the ceiling is," Ethan called back. They fought their way to the central shaft. The elevator car was frozen in the tube. "We have to climb," Ethan said, "or swim." They pulled themselves up the ladder rungs of the shaft, moving weightlessly. Drones buzzed down from the top, red eyes glowing. Lyra threw up a hand. A shimmering shield of hard light materialized, deflecting the plasma bolts. "I cannot hold this for long," she gritted out. "My energy reserves are low." "Almost there," Ethan grunted. He reached the service hatch for the command deck and yanked the manual release. They pulled themselves through, tumbling onto the floor of the command center just as the gravity systems kicked back on with a bone-jarring slam. They hit the deck hard. The command center was a circular room filled with terrified technicians and one very angry overseer. The alien commander stood by the central console. It pulled a jagged, shimmering blade from its robes. "An annoying anomaly," the overseer hissed. Ethan scrambled to his feet, brandishing the stolen pulse rifle like a baseball bat. "She is not an anomaly," Ethan yelled. "She is the protagonist. You are just the bad weather." He charged. It was a stupid move, but it was enough. The overseer swept the blade, slicing the rifle in half. Ethan ducked, sweeping the alien's long, spindly legs with his own leg. The overseer stumbled. "Lyra, the console!" Ethan screamed, grabbing the alien's robe and hanging on for dear life. Lyra sprinted to the central interface. It was a massive pillar of obsidian glass. She didn't type. She slammed both hands onto the surface. "Interface," she commanded. The black glass turned white. Lyra screamed as the connection took hold. This wasn't a passive scan like at the climate facility. This was a forced injection. She was pushing terabytes of data, video files, financial records, the map of the trafficking routes, directly into the global satellite network. The overseer roared, throwing Ethan across the room. Ethan smashed into a wall, ribs cracking. He slumped to the floor, gasping. The alien turned toward Lyra, raising the energy blade. "No!" Ethan wheezed. He spotted a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall next to him. He grabbed it, ripped the pin, and didn't aim for the alien. He aimed for the overseer's feet, which were standing on a cooling grate. He sprayed. A cloud of chemical foam exploded outward. The overseer slipped. The blade slashed harmlessly into the console, missing Lyra's head by an inch. Lyra's back arched. Her skin was blindingly bright, a supernova in the room. "Broadcasting!" she shrieked. In Times Square, the giant ad screens froze. The Coca-Cola ad vanished in Tokyo. The Shibuya crossing screens went black. In living rooms across Kansas, London, and Mumbai, televisions flickered and changed channels. A video feed appeared. It was shaky footage from inside the mines. It was documents showing signatures of world leaders next to alien glyphs. It was a list of names, thousands of missing people, with their current locations in off-world labor camps. And then, Lyra's voice, translated instantly into every major language by the platform's own translation matrix. They told you we were enemies. Lyra's voice rang out, echoing from millions of devices. They told you to look down, look up. We are here, and we are being sold. In the command center, the console sparked and exploded. Lyra was thrown backward. She hit the floor, her light extinguished. She lay still. Lyra! Ethan dragged himself over to her. He pulled her into his lap. She was barely breathing. Her skin was gray, the markings lifeless. Did they see? She whispered, her eyes fluttering open. They were dim, the stars fading. They saw, Ethan said, tears streaking the grime on his face. Everyone saw. You did it. The overseer stood up, shaking off the foam. It looked at the blank screens. It looked at the chaos erupting on the threat monitors, riots starting in major capitals, governments collapsing in real time. You have broken the order, the overseer said calmly. Then there is no need for the platform. The alien pressed a sequence on its wrist gauntlet. Self-destruct sequence initiated. The computer voice announced, structural integrity compromised. Detonation in 60 seconds. The floor shuddered violently. Explosions ripped through the lower levels. The platform began to tilt. We have to go, Ethan said, hoisting Lyra up. She was dead weight. Leave me, Lyra mumbled. I am heavy. Shut up, Ethan grunted. We walk out. He dragged her toward the escape pod bay. The corridor was disintegrating. Chunks of the ceiling were falling. The air was screaming out into the vacuum as hull breaches opened up. They reached the pod bay. Only one pod remained. The others had been jettisoned by the fleeing technicians. Ethan shoved Lyra inside. Get in, he yelled. Lyra grabbed the door frame. She looked at the control panel. The gyroscope is damaged, she said, her navigator instincts cutting through the pain. It will not stabilize, it will tumble. Someone needs to pilot it from the external manual override or it will burn up on re-entry. She looked at Ethan. I will stay, she said. I can hold the platform steady while you launch. Are you insane? Ethan shouted over the roar of the dying station. Get in the damn pod. Ethan, please. You have a life. I have no life without you. Ethan didn't argue anymore. He tackled her. He drove his shoulder into her waist, knocking her backward into the cramped pod. He tumbled in on top of her. He slammed his fist onto the internal launch button. The blast doors blew out. The pod shot away from the station. Through the small porthole, they saw the sky platform. It crumpled like a tin can, then bloomed into a massive fireball of silent, expanding orange light against the black sky. Then, gravity took hold. The pod wasn't stabilized. It began to spin. The G-forces hit them like a physical blow. The window filled with the terrifying, rushing blue and white of the earth below. Ethan wrapped his arms and legs around Lyra, pinning her to the padded wall of the pod, shielding her body with his own. Hold on, he screamed, though he couldn't hear himself over the roar of atmospheric entry. Ethan, Lyra cried, burying her face in his chest. Fire licked the outside of the glass. The heat rose instantly. They were falling. They were burning. And they were holding on to each other as they plummeted toward the world they had just changed forever. The descent was not a fall. It was a burning. The escape pod screamed as it tore through the atmosphere, a metal seed wreathed in fire. Inside, the world was a blur of rattling bulkheads and the deafening roar of friction. Ethan held Lyra against his chest, his arms locked around her, his face buried in the crook of her neck. He could feel the heat radiating through the hull, threatening to cook them alive. But Lyra was colder than ice. She was in a navigator's trance, her mind trying to push against the chaotic tumble of the pod. fighting the physics of an unguided re-entry. The impact, when it finally came, was not a single crash. It was a violent series of collisions. The pod sheared through the canopy of a dense spruce forest, snapping century-old trees like matchsticks. Metal shrieked against wood and stone. The pod spun, slammed into the earth, bounced, and finally plowed a deep, smoking furrow into the side of a mountain ridge before coming to a groaning halt. Silence followed. It was a heavy, ringing silence, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the crackle of small fires starting in the brush. Ethan woke to the taste of copper. Blood was in his mouth. His vision swam in and out of focus, a kaleidoscope of gray smoke and twisted white metal. He tried to move his left arm and cried out. It was pinned and likely broken. He grit his teeth, forcing air into his bruised lungs. "Lyra!" he rasped. There was no answer. Panic, sharp and cold, cut through his haze. He shoved debris aside with his good arm, ignoring the screaming protest of his ribs. Lyra was slumped against the far wall of the pod. Her eyes were closed. The bioluminescent markings on her skin were dark, the color of ash. "Lyra!" He scrambled over the tilted floor. He checked her pulse. It was there, faint, fluttery, like a moth trapped in a jar. She was alive. He had to get them out. The pod was leaking fuel and the fires outside were growing. Ethan kicked at the release lever of the hatch. It was jammed. He kicked again, screaming with the effort, channeling every ounce of his terror into his boot. On the third kick, the explosive bolts misfired, blowing the hatch halfway off its hinges. Cold mountain air rushed in, smelling of pine resin and snow. Ethan dragged Lyra out. He pulled her through the snow, away from the wreckage, collapsing only when they were under the shelter of a rocky overhang. He looked back at the pod. It was a smoking tomb. He looked down at Lyra. She was shivering, not from the cold, but from shock. He took off his jacket, the same one he had worn to the office that morning, a lifetime ago, and wrapped it around her. "We made it," he whispered, his voice cracking. "We are still here." They did not stay alone for long. The broadcast Lyra had sent out was not just a signal. It was a beacon. Kale's underground network had been monitoring the frequency. 6 hours after the crash, as the sun began to dip behind the peaks, a group of 4 figures emerged from the tree line. They were not soldiers. They were dressed in hiking gear and camouflage, carrying medical kits and stretchers. They did not ask questions. They loaded Ethan and Lyra onto the stretchers and vanished back into the woods, moving with the quiet efficiency of people who had been preparing for a war they hoped would never come. Recovery was a slow, blurring season. They were moved to a safe house deep in the Cascades, an old hunting cabin that had been retrofitted with solar panels and satellite internet. It was isolated, buried under 3 feet of snow, and it was the most beautiful place Ethan had ever seen. For the first 2 weeks, Ethan could barely walk. His arm was in a sling, his ribs taped. Lyra slept for 18 hours a day. Her body was regenerating, drawing energy from the sun that filtered through the windows. When she was awake, she was quiet, staring at the fire in the wood stove, her eyes tracking the flames as if they were star charts. But the world outside was not quiet. Ethan spent his days glued to the old television set in the corner of the cabin. The news was a torrent of chaos. The broadcast from the Sky platform had been seen by 4 billion people. There was no way to scrub it. Some governments denied it immediately. The President of the United States called the footage a deep-fake cyber attack orchestrated by foreign radicals. The CEO of Helios Systems, Silas Vance, appeared on every network, looking calm and paternal, claiming that the aliens were actually bioengineered mascots for a new theme park that had gone rogue. But the lies were thin. Too many people had seen the lists. Too many families recognized the names of their missing loved ones in the databases Lyra had leaked. Protests erupted in Paris, London, Tokyo, and New York. They were not polite marches. People burned down Helios Systems recruitment centers. They tore down the smart city pylons that monitored the streets. Whistleblowers began to emerge from the woodwork. Engineers, low-level bureaucrats, cargo pilots, all corroborating parts of the story. And everywhere, there was Lyra. Her image, taken from the security footage of the climate facility infiltration, was plastered on banners dropped from bridges. Digital artists rendered her glowing silhouette on the sides of skyscrapers. She became a symbol of the truth, the star girl who had broken the sky to show the world its chains. "They are making you a saint," Ethan said one evening, watching a report about a rally in Berlin where people were holding candles and wearing glowing blue face paint. Lyra sat up on the couch, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She looked at the screen with a mixture of confusion and sadness. "I am not a saint," she said softly. "I am just a person who did not want to be erased." "That is enough," Ethan said. "In a world that wants to make you a number, staying a person is a miracle." As winter melted into a wet green spring, the cabin ceased to be a hospital and became a home. The immediate threat of death had receded. The Alliance was too busy fighting legal battles and putting out fires to hunt for 2 crash survivors in the mountains. For the first time since the donation bin, Ethan and Lyra had room to breathe. The shift in their relationship was not sudden. It was a slow unfolding, like a fern uncurling in the morning light. It began with shared coffees on the porch, watching the mist rise off the valley floor. It continued with long walks in the woods, where Lyra would stop to examine moss or insects with an intensity that made Ethan fall in love with the world all over again. And then, the physical barrier they had erected for survival finally came down. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. They had been chopping wood for the stove. Ethan was sweaty and tired. Lyra was laughing at his clumsy swing with the axe. They went inside to escape a sudden downpour. Ethan stood by the door, toweling off his hair. Lyra stood in front of him. The cabin was warm, lit by the golden glow of the fire. She reached out and touched the scar on his forehead, a souvenir from the crash. "It is healing," she said. "Everything is healing," Ethan replied. He looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't the frightened refugee in the oversized hoodie anymore. She was strong. She was standing on her own 2 feet, her chin high, her eyes clear and full of a quiet, steady fire. "Ethan," she said, "we are not running today." "No," he whispered, "we aren't." "Then I do not want to wait anymore." She took his hand and led him to the bedroom. The room was small, dominated by a large bed with a quilt made of patches. The rain drummed a steady rhythm on the tin roof. They undressed each other slowly. There was no frantic tearing of clothes, no desperation of a ticking clock. There was a reverence to it. Ethan unbuttoned her shirt, his fingers brushing against the bioluminescent lines that swirled across her chest and stomach. They were glowing with a soft, warm azure light, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. When they lay down, skin against skin, Ethan felt a jolt of pure connection that went deeper than nerves. Her body was cool, smooth, and vibrating with that low-level energy he had come to know as her signature. "Are you afraid?" Lyra asked, her hands tracing the muscles of his back. "Yes," Ethan admitted, hovering over her, supporting his weight on his elbows so he wouldn't crush her. "I am afraid I might break this. I am afraid this is a dream." "It is not a dream," Lyra said. She pulled him down. "And I am not fragile. You cannot break me, Ethan. You can only meet me." Their lovemaking was a conversation. It was a reclaiming of territory. For Lyra, whose body had been treated as a battery, a map, and a bargaining chip, this was an act of absolute autonomy. She guided his hands. She dictated the pace. She took pleasure not as something given to her, but as something she created with him. For Ethan, it was the final shedding of his cowardice. To be this open, this vulnerable with a being who was literally alien, required a courage he hadn't known he possessed. He let go of his need to protect her and simply allowed himself to be with her. There was a moment, in the height of their passion, where Lyra's markings flared bright white, illuminating the dark room like a lightning strike. Ethan gasped, overwhelmed by the sensation of her energy field merging with his own bioelectricity. It wasn't pain. It was a total dissolution of boundaries. "I see you," she whispered against his lips, her voice ragged. "I see all of you." "I am yours," Ethan answered. "I am yours." They fell asleep tangled together, a knot of limbs and sheets. When Ethan woke the next morning, the sun was streaming across the bed. Lyra was still asleep, her head on his chest. Her markings were dim, faint tracings of silver in the daylight. He watched the dust motes dance in the air and felt a profound sense of peace. He realized that for 30 years, he had been holding his breath. Finally, he had exhaled. Life in the cabin was idyllic, but it was not an escape from reality. It was a base of operations. Ethan sat at the rough-hewn table, his laptop open. He was writing. He wasn't writing corporate sustainability reports anymore. He was writing under the pseudonym The Janitor, publishing long-form exposés on the dark web that connected the dots Lyra's data dump had created. He used his insider knowledge of Helios systems to explain the jargon, to decode the financial structures, to show the world exactly how they had been sold out. He wrote with humor, dry, biting wit that cut through the fear. And he wrote with outrage. "They told us the space elevator was for the climate." He typed, "They were right. They just didn't tell us they were engineering the climate for someone else. They turned up the heat so their friends would feel at home, and they billed us for the air conditioning." Lyra had her own work. She sat on the floor, surrounded by maps she had drawn by hand. She was in contact with the resistance cells that had sprung up. She didn't use a phone. She used her mind. She would sit in a meditative state, her markings glowing, projecting her consciousness into the encrypted channels used by the off-world dissidents. She was a bridge. She connected the activists in Seattle with the miners in the asteroid belt. She taught them how to disable the tracking collars, how to confuse the drone sensors, how to hide in plain sight. One evening, after a long session, she opened her eyes and looked at Ethan. "The alliance is fracturing," she said, sounding tired but satisfied. "The council is recalling their ships. They say Earth is too volatile for investment. They are cutting their losses." Ethan handed her a mug of tea. "That sounds like a win." "It is a retreat," Lyra corrected. "They will return, or others will come. But the secrecy is gone. They can no longer invade us softly. If they come back, they will have to knock. And we will be waiting with a shotgun," Ethan said. Lyra smiled. "Or a very strongly worded blog post." Ethan laughed. "Hey, the pen is mightier than the sword." "I have seen a plasma sword," Lyra mused. "I am not sure the pen would win in a direct kinetic engagement. But metaphorically, yes." They sat together in the quiet of the cabin, the work done for the day. Ethan looked at the pile of old clothes in the corner, the clothes he had meant to donate that night. The gray hoodie was there, folded neatly on top of a chair. "You know," Ethan said, looking at the hoodie, When I went to that donation bin, I thought I was doing something good. I thought I was being charitable, giving away my old junk to someone who needed it. He shook his head. It was so surface level. I was just making space in my closet. I wasn't risking anything. Lyra looked at the hoodie, then at him. And now? She asked. Now I know that real goodness isn't about giving away what you don't need, Ethan said. It is about risking what you do need. It is about risking your comfort, your safety, your whole life, just to stand beside someone who is shivering. It cost me everything to open that bin door again, and it was the best bargain I ever made. Lyra stood up and walked over to him. She sat on his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. I learned something too, she said softly. In the camps. I thought my value was what I carried, my map, my genes, my ability to navigate the stars. I thought that if I lost those things, I would be nothing. She pressed her hand to his chest. But here, with you, I am just Lyra. I cook terrible eggs. I steal the blankets. I like the sound of rain, and that is enough. I am worthy of love not because I am useful, but because I exist. Ethan kissed her forehead. You are more than enough. We are a good team, Lyra said. The janitor and the navigator. Sounds like a bad comic book, Ethan grinned. Or a very good story, she said. Summer turned to autumn, painting the mountains in gold and crimson. On a clear, crisp night in October, they sat outside on the porch steps, wrapped in blankets. The sky was a vast, glittering dome of stars, unpolluted by city lights. Lyra pointed a finger upward. Do you see those 3 stars? She asked. The ones in a line? Orion's belt, Ethan said. To my people, that is the gateway, Lyra said. And that cluster there, the Pleiades, we call that the nursery. It is where new stars are born. She moved her hand, tracing invisible lines against the black canvas. I used to look at the sky from the prison window, she said. It looked so cold, so distant. I thought I would never have a home again. She lowered her hand and placed it over Ethan's heart. But the sky is just a map, she whispered. It is not the destination. Ethan looked at her. Her face was illuminated by the starlight and the soft glow of her own skin. She looked ethereal, yet entirely solid. I was so afraid of you that first night, Ethan admitted. When I saw your eyes, I wanted to run. I wanted to get back in my car and drive until I forgot I ever saw you. I was afraid of how big the universe suddenly felt. And now, Ethan said, covering her hand with his, the universe feels just the right size. It fits right here. Lyra smiled. She took his hand and placed it directly on the glowing pattern on her chest, the center of her bioelectric star chart. This is my home, she said, to not a planet, not a coordinate, you. And you are mine, Ethan said. They sat there for a long time, watching the galaxy spin slowly overhead. They spoke their vows not to a priest or a judge, but to the silence of the mountains. They promised to face whatever came next, whether it was Alliance hit squads, political upheaval, or just the challenge of building a life from scratch together. They were no longer the savior and the refugee. They were partners. They had seen the worst of 2 worlds and chosen to build a third one, right here in the space between them. Far above the atmosphere, 200 miles up, a small satellite drifted in a polar orbit. It was an old piece of junk hardware, hacked and repurposed by the Resistance, looking for signs of Alliance activity. Its camera swept across the dark side of the Earth. It passed over the Pacific, over the glowing spider webs of the cities, and over the vast darkness of the North American wilderness. It zoomed in on a tiny coordinate in the mountains. The image was grainy, black and white, processed through thermal filters. It showed a small square structure, a cabin. Smoke was curling lazily from the chimney. The windows were bright with warmth. Inside the frame of the window, the thermal signature picked up two figures. They were moving close together, swaying. They were dancing. Ethan and Lyra, barefoot on the wooden floorboards, moving to music only they could hear. Lyra's head was thrown back, laughing. Ethan was holding her close. The light from Lyra's markings cast soft, star-shaped reflections on the walls, turning the small room into a galaxy of its own. The satellite continued its orbit, drifting away into the silence of space. The universe was still dangerous. It was still messy. There were still conspiracies to fight and worlds to save. But in that little corner of the dark, two beings who were supposed to be tools of power had chosen to be something radically different. They were fully alive, they were fully seen, and they were fully each other's. The feed cut to black. The story continued.